Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started. Hey, Lauren Lefkowitz.
John Spears, we're here.
We are here. You know, I often wonder, I always start these the same way. And I wonder if our listeners are like, oh, wait, am I listening to the last, am I re-listening to an episode I already listened to? Because it's like, Lauren Lefkowitz, hey.
Do you remember when we were getting started and we thought we should have some sort of shtick at the beginning?
Yes.
That was fun. That was adorable.
And that didn't last very long.
Well, we tried it in our first episode, which we ended up re-recording because neither one of us sounded like us.
We were news reporting robots is basically what we were.
We were. Today, in being human and also being a leader.
I just remember that first episode. It was so awful. I think we recorded for it felt like an hour and 45 minutes. And every 30 minutes, we were like, this isn't working. This is not right. This doesn't feel right. And we were both, I think, in our own frustrated because we thought it was going to be easier.
Yeah, but we knew, though, that we should be doing this. There was no question we should be doing it. We just were we're doing it not authentically. We're trying to be something for some audience we don't even know yet.
Yeah, I felt like we stepped into a caricature. We weren't ourselves. It was super robotic. I think from my perspective, I was trying to prove something to the people who are listening. I was like, listen to me. I'm a coach. I'm
a coach and a strong leader.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. And I just remember it just did not feel right. So to be able to be like, Lauren Lefkowitz with jazz hands feels way more authentic and natural for me than that other experience.
Yes.
Awesome. So Lauren, on our last conversation, we talked about change and the reality that change is a part of our human experience. The world is the acceleration of change is happening more and more frequently. I think in my experience, more than we've ever experienced in the past and previous generations have experienced with technological advances, shifts in politics, COVID, all of this sort of interconnectedness that's happening and the impact of that and the acceleration of change. Talked about how we respond to that, how we be in that change. And today we want to talk about change from a different perspective. And that's when we're in what I call, and I think I've called the numerous episodes before, the inertia of life, when we're just kind of floating on a floaty down a stream or down a river, and we're just going with the flow. There isn't a lot of proactive choice to change. We're just kind of going with it. And so we want to talk about that experience today, as well as some maybe tools and experiences that we've had with breaking out of that inertia into really living the kind of life that we want to live.
It's funny, the word inertia, if you don't know the definition, actually sounds like it's moving, right? I mean, I know it's a form of inert, right? Which is not moving, but the sh at the end of it makes it sound like you're going and doing stuff.
Right.
And it's not. And it is like what we talked about last time, that gravitron ride. It just pushes you against a wall and you're like, okay, I guess I'm here now. I guess this is where I live. I live against a wall as the world spins around me. And we don't want to live that way. And when we have something major happen, like the world events you've been talking about, or even in our own life, we get a job, we lose a job, we get married, we get divorced, we have kids, we move to a new place, like all of these things that are like big and often happen to us to some extent, we have to decide, are we going to just float along the river, or are we going to get out of the floating tube and say like, nope, I don't want it to be this way. But there are other times in our lives when there isn't a major event, there isn't a major happening, and we've just sort of settled into some sort of status quo, some way of being and way of living that we don't really like, but it's okay. And then we have to look at change differently.
Yeah. And I think there are probably a lot of people who go their entire life in the inertia of life, in the flow of whatever happens. And, frankly, like there's no judgment about that. I'm not saying that's a wrong way to be or to live. I just think there's a much better way. There's a different way to live where there's fulfillment and choice and meaningfulness and aliveness. And I can kind of speak from my experience. When I was in that inertia, when I was in the kind of just go with the flow status quo, life was very dull. And I made choices to kind of keep it dull, but I don't think I was really alive and experiencing aliveness and that quality of aliveness that really made my life feel meaningful and important and satisfying and fulfilling.
And that's where so many of us, I think, just live, right? And I know people can't see me on the screen. We don't do a video podcast, but I notice my background all the time when I'm on Zoom, because I chose this wall color, which is like a light beige, because it was neutral and it felt simple to choose a neutral color. And every time I'm on video, I notice that I am basically the same color as my wall. And I always think it's such a good descriptor of how it can be.
Yeah.
My wall is okay. It's fine. It will look better when I choose a different color, which I will soon. And also I wear a lot of like beiges and olive greens and, sort of earthy colors. So today I'm wearing a shirt that's the same color as my skin on the sleeves, which is the same color as my wall. And like even my hair almost looks the same color today. So that's how life can be, that everything just sort of turns beige, right? And for a while, there's like almost like a soothing comfort to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at my wall and some days I'm like, I cannot live like this. I have to get a tapestry or something until I can figure out, what I want to paint. And we have, I think, these inklings of it could be different. It could be better. It could be more. I could love it. I could be vibrant. And then we forget, right? I get up from my desk. I'm not looking at my wall. I'm not on a Zoom call. And then I come back to it and I remember, oh yeah, I don't love this. I don't love this background. And I think sometimes we forget and sometimes we intentionally don't look too closely because the same is like, all right.
Yeah, I have a completely unrelated question for you, just as like a side note. I'm really curious. Are you one of those people who, when you're on Zoom, look at yourself when you're talking or look at other people when you're talking?
I look at other people when they are talking. I look at me when I'm talking.
Okay, so I do the same thing, and I wonder what this says about us. I'm sure there's someone out there who's like done this study, but even now as I'm talking, I'm like looking at myself. Mm-hmm. Instead of you. And I find that really interesting. Sorry, just side note of a question.
When Zoom first became popular at the beginning of the pandemic, I only looked at me. And then I tried to catch looking at me from the side when I was trying to look at other people to see how it looked when I looked at other people. And then if I watched something back that was recorded, I watched me in the recording and how I was being. Yeah. And now I think I've let go of some of the egocentricity around it and I can actually focus on another person.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Side note, just interesting question, whatever. Mm-hmm. All right. So we're talking about this inertia. We're talking about sort of just being in the status quo, going with the flow, not really making any proactive choices to live and to be the kind of people we want to be and live the kind of life we want to live. Like, how do we end up here? Tell me a little bit about your experience, like how you ended up in that place. What was that experience like? Give me some color to that.
Yeah. Here's my 17-step process to living a life that is like just under the level of okay. No, I don't actually have 17 steps. It does happen in steps though. It happens slowly, right? Like if I think about my own career, I started in this place where I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I knew I needed to work for money. So I went to a job and I met some nice people and we went out to happy hour sometimes, and that was real fun. And then it got kind of painful to be in that job because I was everybody's assistant and that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew it wasn't that. So my next company, I was looking for like someplace fun, and I found someplace fun. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just got a job as an accountant, funny enough. And I did that for a little while. I tried another job in the company, a sales job that I was awful at. And then I got tapped on the shoulder to move into HR. And when I moved into HR, I could not believe my luck. It was like somebody turned on a light switch and the world lit up for me, because HR was everything I wanted to do. And it wasn't just because I liked people, which I did and I do. It was because I loved structure and rules and policies and building and training and helping people sort themselves out. Like every aspect of HR excited me, and I always felt like I was contributing and helping. And as I grew in the career, I liked it. So I worked more. I worked more because I felt a responsibility to work more. And this was where the steps started, right? Then I got sick. And if you're listening to us for the first time, I've been living with chronic illness since my early 30s. And I wanted to prove that I could work hard. So working hard became a little bit less because I was excited about it, and a little bit more defensive because I didn't want people to know I was sick, and I didn't want them to think I was too sick or too weak to do the job. And that became this stair step of working a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder until I was a full-on workaholic and I just worked all of the time. Now, if you had thrown me from a 40-hour-a-week job into an 80-plus-hour-a-week job overnight, I never would have done it. I would have said, like, you're insane. I'm not doing that. But because it was this incremental growth into not as good as I wanted, I kept justifying that it was all right. I kept justifying that it was part of the deal. I kept justifying that, like, if I was going to grow, I had to prove myself. And if I was going to prove myself, I had to take a promotion without a big pay raise, or I had to take more work on my plate without a bonus or a raise, or I had to take the work and the money without the promotion, right? I made all of these sort of concessions throughout my career about what was okay and what wasn't okay. So by the time I became a workaholic and I was really spending all of my time working, I had self-soothed into all of this is okay and normal and just the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got there. And then it was like, well, this is just the way it is. It's fine, right? And we know my tagline's fine as a trap. But I justified that it was fine and that all I did was work and sleep because, well, I was a sick person. So I had to take care of my health when I could, but most of my time was going to be spent working. And until, and we'll talk about this, I know later, until there was a time for a change, there was no time for change. I didn't have time for it. I didn't make time for it. So I just like went down this, rode down this river in inertia and reacted to what came at me.
When you said that, I just had this visual of you like in a rowboat, just kind of just like going down the river, down by the river, just kind of like. For those of you who listen to us often, I don't know if this comes through, but both of us are huge fans of Bridesmaids. And before almost every episode that we record, we're like, are you ready to party? like the best of them down by the river. Anyway, it just brings me so much joy, and it's probably
Yes.
so random to hear people singing that on a podcast. But anyway, I just had to put that out there because we said this was going to be fun, pretty funny and vulnerable.
Yeah.
But you know, when you were talking, it made me think about something, about an exercise that I just learned. I'm in this gay men's group coaching program by this guy named George Ransby. He's an amazing coach. He's a breathwork facilitator. If you're looking for some breathwork, even some coaching, he has really great stuff. I would totally recommend you get on his list. I think his website is george-ramsey.com, I think, but you can Google him. He's great. And one of the things that we just did is to talk about an issue that you're experiencing and like teach the class on how to keep this issue going. And so here is my 5-step process that I just came up with in how to stay in the status quo and in the inertia of life. Okay, are you ready for me to teach this? This is a master class. Like I've been a master of this in the past. No longer, not anymore.
I'm ready.
The first step, number 1, is to be really busy all the time. Just like busy yourself with appointments and to-dos. Constantly keeping yourself busy is a really important way to kind of just stay in the status quo. Step number 2 is to constantly think about other people and their needs. Prioritize other people all the time. If there's like a need that you have, never acknowledge it or listen to it or do anything about it. Just focus on other people. The third is never take the time to really do an inventory of your life in terms of, are you meeting goals? Are you where you want to be? Where are you in terms of your vision for your life? Never, ever, ever do that. That will assure that you're like on this inertia path, in the rowboat, whatever. Number 4, always like have lots of noise in your head, whether it's music or TV or your own chatter. Like turn up the volume on distractions at all times, so you're never left with quiet. And the fifth and final step to stay in the inertia of life is to always be at effect. And when we talk about at effect, we talk about being a victim, not having any agency, not believing that you can create a different approach or a different reality for yourself. That's my 5-step masterclass on how to stay in the inertia of life, the flow, the status quo.
That is a great way to demonstrate that you do not believe you deserve joy.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for a long time, I think one of the things that kept me from making the leap to choice and to proactive change was I didn't deserve it. Mm-hmm. Who am I to think I can have this amazing life? Who am I to think that I can actually have the life that deep, deep down I actually long for?
Who are you?
I mean, I have all these like amazing curse words I was just going to say. I'm a bad AMFer. Like that's what I am. Like, no, I think, I'm amazing. I'm worthy. I think the one thing that comes to mind, the one word that if I were to have one word to say who I am and why I'm deserving is just because I'm worthy, because I'm a human. And as humans, we are inherently worthy to have the kind of life that we want to live, regardless of any other attribute or status or whatever. Like just by being human, we are worthy to have and create the life that we want.
So true and so powerful. And we forget that because we are so busy following your 5-step plan for how to have a mediocre life and live in inertia. We are trained for that as adults. We are trained to serve others. We are trained to react and respond and not get too excited about things and not ask for or look for or try to create too much. And it's boring. It's unsatisfying. And eventually it becomes painful.
Yeah. You can find this 5-step plan on my next TED Talk. It'll be released soon. I'll give it away for free. It's my new lead magnet.
Great.
Everyone in the world can have this for free. All right, we've kind of talked about how we get ourselves in this place. And now that we know that there's like an opportunity and a choice to be proactive about the kind of life we want to live, that we don't actually need to stay in this place of inertia or the status quo, I really want to talk about how do we get out of this way of thinking and this experience that we're having into really going into the direction of our dreams, into making the proactive choice to change and to see those kinds of shifts in our lives.
There are a couple of things. First is we have to notice. We spend a lot of time not noticing because we're busy, because we're involved in things. We don't notice things that are not acutely painful. And there is a new term that I learned in the last week or so that is called the region beta paradox, which is the phenomenon that people can recover more quickly from more intense pain than from less distressing experiences. So what that means in like human language is that it is easier to notice a crash, something terrible, a tragedy, and recover from that than it is to notice something that's like mildly inconvenient, not amazing, slightly more painful or slightly worse on an ongoing basis, right? So if you don't love your job, for example, your boss is like, okay, but sometimes they yell at you. The pay is all right, but sometimes you wish you could be making more and you kind of know you could be, but it feels harder to go find a job to make more money than what you're making now. The job's okay, but it's not that interesting. You're much less likely to take action on it than if it is terrible. If you're being harassed, if you're being so severely underpaid, you can't pay your bills, then you're going to react and respond and do something else. So you have to notice the things that aren't so painful, you must take action on them. Mm-hmm. And then you have to picture the future of what that looks like if it continues along. So in my case, if I continued along working 80 hours a week, it would eventually have broken me. I wouldn't have been able to continue on. And for me, it did get painful enough for me to change. But I recognize now that I could have noticed earlier that it wasn't what I wanted for my longer term. I could have gotten started on this path that I'm on now earlier, and it would have been more fun, faster. Mm-hmm. I don't regret it because I think I took a lot of lessons from it. And I think everything happens, at the time that it can, that we have the power within ourselves to make those decisions. But I could have gone along my whole life and not noticed it and just worked 80 hours till I retired.
Totally.
So notice and imagine what your future looks like if you continue this way, and notice and imagine what your future looks like if you decide to proactively make a change. Then decide, how do I want it to be? Do I want to be in this life and continue on this trajectory, or do I want it to be different? And then you have to decide who you want to be in that, right? We've talked about being and doing before. And James Clear talks in Atomic Habits about how building habits isn't only about doing the things. Yeah. It's not only about checking off the boxes that you exercise 4 times a week and that you eat 3 meals a day and whatever it is. You are a person who exercises. You are a person who eats well and nourishes your body. And you have to decide that that is the person you want to be, and then do the things that support being that person. And then do. Mm-hmm. Right? Doing is the last step, actually. We always think it's the first step, and so many of us are doers, but it's actually the last step. Right? So it goes with my philosophy that I always oversimplify of notice, decide, do. Right? But noticing is so important here because you can choose not to notice and just keep going. So you have to choose to notice. And then when you get to the part of being and doing, we say it all the time, don't do it by yourself. We both firmly believe in hiring a coach. We have our own coaches. We coach other people. We're both available for hire. And wouldn't it be funny if this was just like one long commercial?
Gotcha.
We are no longer people who just try to do everything ourselves and then decide if we can't do it ourselves, it can't be done. Right? That's how we both were. We both are very good at doing things and being in service of other people. And I learned for myself, finally, that in order to be in service for myself, I needed to not only seek, but also receive help. Not just check a box that says I hired someone or I went to a class, but actually be in receipt of that help and internalize it. And that is what made the big difference for me.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you see as the steps for getting to the crux of how to make change when no change is required?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really resonated with the theory that you talked about. There's this quote out there, and it's either attributed to Tony Robbins or to Ed Foreman, depending on what Google search you have. But it's this idea is that change really only happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And so, for me, I think, to your point, I could have gone all my life just going with the flow. And I've seen so many people do that. I have friends that do that. I have acquaintances that do that. And there's a lot of that is like they're in denial. They don't want to sort of admit or open up to the fact that their life isn't going in the direction that they want it to go. And so I think, for me, when I think about when I made a decision to proactively make change, to begin to take steps in the direction I wanted to go, it was really uncomfortable. It was really hard. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I had to really create some space in my life and assess what I actually wanted and where I was on that path to getting and achieving what I wanted or living the life I wanted. And so for me, I think the first thing that I did and that I talked to all my clients, one of the first calls that I have with all the clients that I work with is really getting clear on the vision of the life that they want. Like, I ask, what do you truly want deep down? I want them to imagine themselves there at the end of our engagement or in a year. I want them to be able to articulate what they see, what they feel, what they're experiencing in life. What does it feel? What does that look like to be at that end goal? And I think that really creates a connection and a being within us to be able to move forward in that direction. The second thing is, I always ask myself and my clients, what is getting in the way? What are the limiting beliefs that you have that are making you believe that you can't actually achieve that life, that you can't have that life? What are those narratives? What are those experiences in the past that are kind of influencing their ability to see themselves at that final goal? And the last thing that I always talk about is we talk about the importance of structure or the importance of accountability and support. And we all need help. We all need support. We all need a cheerleader along the way and structure to help us move in the direction we want to move. I'm not always motivated to have the life I want to live. I'm not always feeling, I don't have the desire all the time to like wake up at 5:30 and go to the gym or to eat a healthy meal or frankly to spend time with my kids. Sometimes I just want to do my own thing, but being a good dad and being someone who's really invested in my kids' lives is incredibly important to me. So I create the structures in my life and the discipline and the commitment to do the things that I want to do, very much like your James Clear quote. Like, I'm not just someone who, has to spend time with my kids or has to eat healthy. I am a father who invests in my kids. That's, who I am. I am someone who, eats healthy and wants to exercise and wants to build this business.
I love the point about thinking about what your clients really want and talking to them about what they really want. I find that so often when I'm having a first call with a potential client, they haven't even thought about it. And we can spend a little bit of time on that call sussing it out. What would it look like if you didn't have any buts, if you didn't have any restrictions, if you didn't have any barriers? And I recently spoke to somebody who I am not yet working with, who told me that her biggest fear is that if she works with me, she will blow up her whole life to go after what she actually wants. And that's a very real fear. And also, it might be what she wants. So you get to decide as an individual and as a human and as a person who has potential and value and worthiness, you get to decide what your life is going to look like and how amazing it can be and how amazing you're willing to tolerate it being. Because just as scary as it is to fail, it can also be really scary to succeed.
Wow, Lauren, that is really powerful, this idea that it can be scary to fail and succeed, and also the consequences of choice that we have in our lives to blow it up and to make change or to stay in the inertia of life. But it sounds a lot more fulfilling and alive to make the choice that's going to create change and different perspective and go actually in the direction that we want to go.
Yeah, it's so much more fulfilling to choose change. And it's the harder decision to make, but it's ultimately the easier way to live.
Lauren, I could talk to you all day about this and like a million other topics. I found this conversation really challenging for me and fulfilling, and I hope it does the same to our community who are listening to this today. Thanks for being with us.
We're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and join us next time for more Real Talk.